So I wanted to continue talking about what's going on in our wonderful capital. And, this is the week right after the Chenrezig retreat. And during the Chenrezig retreat, in one talk, I was saying how when we have things happen with people, we don't have to get into a mentality where we have blame and fault and say, this person's to blame and I'm totally innocent, or I'm to blame, I made it all go wrong, and not get into this whole blame thing, but just to accept, okay, a situation happened, everybody has responsibility, okay? And we all take our own responsibility because situations are dependent arisings. So somebody wrote in and she said, as I was working today and going in and out of my car and others' homes, every radio and TV station that was tuned into some news source had some constellation of talking heads analyzing and debating about the government shutdown. I realized there was a phrase that I kept hearing over and over and over again. Who's at fault? Who's to blame? It was asked by Republicans and Democrats and comedians and moderators. I heard the comedians are having a great time with this. What came to mind were the teachings you gave about blame and criticism during the retreat. And the question that came up for me was, how do I look at this through the eyes of no fault? Okay. How would we analyze this situation if we didn't have anyone to blame at all because no one was at fault? Okay. What would we do with all of our fear, anxiety, frustration, and anger if there is no target? And then I'm wondering if you'd be willing to share your thoughts in this direction in a BBC. It would be really helpful for me and I guess for many others as well. Okay, so when we talk about no fault and no blame, that doesn't mean no responsibility. Okay? Fault and blame are different than responsibility. Because fault and blame, whenever there's fault and blame, we drill into somebody with a lot of anger and hatred. We want to put them down. We want to just slam them. Okay? With responsibility, there's not that mental attitude. Okay? So when we talk about no blame and no responsibility, we're not saying no blame and no fault. We're not saying there's no responsibility. We're just saying that we look and we see who has what responsibility, but we don't have to get angry and hate people and get all up in arms and have a fit about it. Okay, but we do have to hold people responsible, and we do have to point out when we think that they are not fulfilling their responsibility in a correct way. Okay? So this is very important. We still speak up about things. There's still responsibility to be had, but we don't do this with an angry mind that just sees one party as totally negative, whatever they do, and we can't stand them. Okay? It's seeing a situation where everybody has something to contribute, and we're dealing with different people's responsibility and trying to help people learn how to be more responsible. Okay? So that's the point that I'm getting at, So if you look in this current situation, a lot of it has to do with our government structure, yeah? And the fact that, like, the rules in Congress allow the Speaker of the House to not put forth a bill unless the majority of people in his own party support it. That seems like kind of a nutty rule, you know, that if something's before the House, they should be able to vote on it. There shouldn't be this unspoken rule that you have to have all the people on your own party involved, because they say that if they put up a plain, clean bill, that you would, you know, with no strings attached, that both Democrats and Republicans would support it and the government would stay open. So some of it has to do with these kind of rules, how they run things in the House, and then the whole filibuster thing in the Senate, and the fact that Ted Cruz could speak 21 hours and waste everybody's time. You know, kind of how is that possible? So, you know, part is due to government structure. And then, you know, part is due to having a two-party system in the way we do. I don't know if in a multi-party system, like in UK, if this kind of thing could happen. Because apparently a government, yeah, you're saying no, huh? Yeah, you're British, so you know. And apparently people in Europe are scratching their heads saying, how does this happen? This would never happen in our country. So it probably has to do somewhat with just the whole organization of how things are run in the political parties. Yeah, and then you have to look at, you know, what are the Republicans doing? What are the Democrats doing? Yeah, I mean, in my way of looking at it, kind of, I mean, I pretty much agree with the president. The Congress's responsibility is to, you know, make a budget. And if, you know, you don't put other strings attached to it, or if you're going to do it, then both sides can put strings attached. Yeah, then the Democrats should be able to put some of their favorite policies on there and say, we won't, you know, we'll only negotiate with you if we have some of our favorite policies attached. But I don't think Congress should even run on that way at all. I mean, it's a straightforward issue, and you do that without voting on any other thing. You take everything on its own merits instead of attaching it to something else. Yeah. And then as far as the, you know, the motives in the minds of the Tea Party people, I can't understand. You know, it'd be quite interesting to understand really what the deeper motives are, because I can't help but feel that there's something under there that isn't being spoken, that they're terribly afraid of, that's fueling part of this, you know. But I don't know. But I do know that, you know, and I think what's frustrating for most of us is that we feel like we don't have any power at this point, that what's happening in the whole country, what's affecting, you know, the entire population, is being decided by a few people in Congress, and specifically being influenced by a small group of people in one of the parties in one of the branches of government, you know, and so most of us feel like, you know, we're left out of the whole thing in some way. I don't know, do you feel left out of it? Yeah. Like what? Yeah, it's a hostage situation. And I'm just thinking about these people who are out of work, you know, and are on furloughs. You're on furlough, you know, and whether you get paid or don't get paid, I mean, you're just the collateral damage, but the congressional people keep getting their salaries. Yeah, they're called essential, but I don't know. So, you know, I mean, the only way we have some power is at the time, you know, in the next election. But then, of course, that's a year later, and people have short-term memories, so who's going to remember that? If this kind of thing happened in Britain between two parties, would you have an election over it right then and there?
We could, but the Speaker of the House in the UK has to be non-partisan. So if you're appointed as Speaker, you're not allowed to make any partisan moves or bias.
Wow. Okay, in Britain, the Speaker of the House has to be non-partisan. And you're not allowed to what?
They're not allowed to exercise any bias.
And they aren't allowed to exercise any bias. That's incredible. That would change this whole dynamic, wouldn't it? If the Speaker of our house had to be unbiased? Yeah, that would change the whole thing. Okay? Yeah. So we can see there's a lot of different factors playing in here. Yeah. What would people in Britain do?
They would have to we wouldn't get to this standstill because of this non-partisan.
Okay, you wouldn't even get to this point. Yeah.
I can't think of an equivalent when we've got to that kind of point.
Yeah, there's no equivalent. Okay, well, we rebelled from the British. Yeah, and we had the Tea Party responsible then too, didn't we? You know, it's funny because in our history books we look at the Tea Party and like they're such patriots. Look at them, they were sticking up for what's right. And if somebody did that nowadays, they would be called a terrorist, wouldn't they? You know, if you took somebody's stuff like that, I mean, they would be arrested and they would be called a terrorist. So, yeah. Okay.